The cold hit me the second I stepped out of the SkyTrain station, that particular Vancouver cold that gets into your collar and doesn't leave. February in this city is gray in a way that feels personal, like the sky decided it had something against you specifically. I pulled my coat tighter and walked faster. My shift started at 5, and it was already 1:45. The restaurant wasn't far from the station, 3 blocks down Robson, past the pharmacy where I used to buy Maeve's cold medicine in bulk, past the coffee shop I couldn't afford to stop at anymore. Aldara's was the kind of place that had a dress code for its servers, but paid just above minimum wage. Linen napkins, cloth-covered menus. The kind of clientele who asked about the wine pairing and left 14% tips. I'd been working there for 2 years, long enough to know every table's sightline, every manager's mood by the way they walked in. Long enough to smile through 8-hour shifts on 4 hours of sleep. Maeve was 7. She'd had an ear infection the week before, and I'd missed a shift, which meant this month was already tight before it started. My sister had taken her to the doctor for me, which I was grateful for and felt terrible about at the same time. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes with relying on someone's generosity over and over. It doesn't go away with sleep. I pushed through the staff entrance at the back and started my pre-shift routine. Uniform, hair up, apron folded exactly the way the floor manager liked it. I'd gotten good at being invisible in all the right ways. Efficient, unobtrusive, there when needed and gone when not. Full house tonight, my colleague said without looking up from the reservation sheet. His name was Theo, and he'd been working at Aldara's even longer than me. Private party in the back. 12 people. They called ahead. Who's running the back room? You are. He looked up then. Sorry. Denise called in sick. I didn't say anything. I tied my apron and went to check my station. The front of the restaurant filled up by 6:30. The usual weeknight crowd. Couples, small business dinners, a table of women celebrating something. I moved through my tables automatically, taking orders, refilling glasses, smiling at the right moments. My feet had learned to stop hurting around the 3rd hour. Or maybe they still hurt and I'd just stopped noticing. The private party in the back was supposed to arrive at 7. At 6:55, I heard the front door open. Even from across the restaurant, something about the sound was different. The way conversation dipped slightly. The way the hostess straightened. I didn't look up immediately. I was writing down an order. The salmon, the risotto, no onions on the side salad. And then something made me turn around. He was already looking at me. That's the thing I keep coming back to when I try to make sense of that night. In a full restaurant, with people moving and talking and the usual orchestrated noise of a busy dinner service, he was already looking directly at me. I had not seen Kieran Ashby in 9 years. He looked different in the way that people do when time has actually changed them, not just aged them. Broader through the shoulders. Composed in a way he hadn't been at 23, like he'd learned to take up space deliberately. He wore a dark suit, no tie, and the kind of watch you notice without knowing why. Behind him came 4 men in similar suits, and the hostess was already gesturing toward the back room, and I could see her explain something to him, some scheduling detail, but he wasn't looking at her. He was still looking at me. I turned back to my table and finished writing the order. My handwriting looked the same as always. I don't know how. I'll have that right I said, and I walked toward the kitchen. In the 6 steps between the dining room and the kitchen door, I had one clear thought. He doesn't know. He can't know. Maeve's birthday is in August. The math doesn't work for him unless he does the math. And why would he? 9 years ago, Kieran Ashby had told me he was leaving Vancouver. His uncle's company in Calgary, an opportunity he couldn't pass up. Everything happened very fast. We'd been together for a year and a half. I was 24. He was 23. We weren't engaged. We hadn't talked about the future in any formal way. He said he'd be back in 6 months. He said we'd figure it out. I found out I was pregnant 11 days after he left. I tried to call him twice. The second time, a woman answered his phone, and I hung up. I told myself I'd imagined what I heard in her voice. I called his number one more time a week later, and it went straight to voicemail, and I just stopped. I had Maeve with my sister in the room and my mother on speakerphone from Kelowna. I named her after nobody in particular, just a name I'd always liked. I went back to work when she was 4 months old because rent in Vancouver doesn't care about your reasons. I had not looked Kieran Ashby up online in 3 years. I had made a rule about it. Theo found me in the kitchen. "Your back party's in. You good to go in?" "Give me a second," I said. I ran cold water over my wrists at the sink, an old trick my mother taught me. Gets your heart rate down faster than splashing your face. I looked at the wall above the sink and breathed and thought about practical things. I'd done harder than this. I'd done a lot harder than this. I went into the back room. There were 12 of them at a long rectangular table. Business dinner, clearly. The mix of postures, the laptops closed on one end, the way conversation paused when I entered. I kept my eyes moving professionally across the table, scanning for water glasses, for settled positions, for who was ready to order. "Good evening," I said. "I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start with some water for the table?" "Please." The voice came from the far end. I started with the far end because that was my job, and it made logistical sense and not for any other reason. I filled glasses moving down the table, and when I reached him I did not hesitate, because hesitation would have been worse. "Water," I said. "Thank you," he said. Our eyes met for exactly as long as professionally necessary, and then I moved on to the next glass. I gave them menus. I answered questions about the menu. The scallops were local. The beef was Alberta raised. The sommelier could come by if they wanted wine recommendations. I wrote things down and I smiled, and I kept my breathing even. When I came back to take the first course orders, the man to Kieran's left was on his phone. The one to his right was turned away, talking. Kieran looked up at me when I reached him. "The duck," he said then. "What's your name?" "I'm not sure that's relevant to your order," I said pleasantly. I wrote down the duck. "It's been 9 years," he said quietly. "You look exactly the same. Would you like to start with soup or salad?" He was quiet for a moment. "Soup," he said. I moved to the next person. The next 2 hours were the most focused work I had done in my life. Every movement deliberate, every thought quarantined behind the operational needs of the table. Water refills, bread basket, first course timing. The man at the end had a shellfish allergy I'd flagged, and I made sure his plate came out separately, checked by the kitchen. Kieran's duck came out correctly, the sauce on the side the way he'd specified. I noted that he'd specified it. He was watching me, when he could. Not obviously. He was skilled enough to make it look accidental. But I felt it the way you feel weather changing. Near the end of the meal, when the table had broken into smaller conversations and I was clearing appetizer plates, he said quietly, "Can I talk to you?" "After." "I get off at 10, I said, not looking at him. "I'll wait." I didn't say yes, I didn't say no. I carried the plates back to the kitchen and stood for a moment with my back against the cold metal shelving. He knew who I was, he'd seen me, and whether I wanted this conversation or not, I was already in it. My phone buzzed at 8:45. My sister. Maeve's asking when you're home. Also, she has a loose tooth. Very excited. I typed back, "Tell her Midnight Tooth Fairy doesn't start her route until the tooth is actually out. Give her a kiss from me." 3 dots. Then, "She wants to know if the Tooth Fairy knows about inflation." In spite of everything, I laughed. Then I went back out to the floor. The private party wrapped up around 9:30. I printed the bill, ran the card, said the correct things about a lovely evening. The other men filed out. Kieran stayed. He was sitting at the far end of the now empty table, his jacket draped over the chair beside him, hands folded on the tablecloth. He'd left the bill without looking at it, I noticed. Just signed. I started clearing glasses. "You don't have to keep working," he said. "I'm on the clock until 10. He was quiet while I worked. Then, "I'm based in Toronto now. I came back to Vancouver for a deal. Commercial real estate. There's a development on the east side." He stopped. "You don't care about that." "I don't know what I care about yet," I said honestly. "I haven't decided." He looked at that for a moment. "Fair." I set the last glass on my tray and then, because avoiding it wasn't making anything easier, I sat down in the chair across from him. Not the one his jacket was on. The one 2 chairs down. "What do you want, Kieran?" I said. He met my eyes. "I want to explain." "Okay, that's it? Just, okay?" I said, "Okay, not that it'll change anything. Go ahead." He exhaled, and then he talked, and I listened, and I gave him the credit of listening actually, not just waiting for him to finish. His uncle's company had been in trouble. Serious trouble. the kind that involved lawyers and collapsed contracts, and a family scrambling to not lose everything. He'd gone to Calgary, thinking he'd be there 6 months, and stayed 3 years trying to help salvage something. His phone had been on a corporate plan that got cancelled. He'd lost contacts, numbers, a whole digital life in the chaos of it. "I called your old number," he said. "It was disconnected." "I changed numbers when I moved," I said. He looked at me. "I didn't know where you'd gone." The reasonable part of me understood that this was possible. People lost touch. Moves happened. The version of me at 24, who'd tried to reach him and stopped, didn't know any of this. She just knew the silence. "There's something I need to tell you," I said. He waited. I had rehearsed this conversation in my head approximately 0 times, because I had told myself for 9 years that it would never happen, which meant I had no script. I just had the fact of it, sitting on the table between us like something I'd been carrying. So long I'd stopped feeling its weight. "I have a daughter," I said. "She's 8 in August." He was still. The kind of still that means something is moving on the inside. "Her name is Maeve," I said. "She has your nose." I noticed it when she was about 3, and I didn't know what to do with that, so I just kept going. Silence. "You should have told me," he said. I tried. I kept my voice level. "You didn't answer. A woman picked up your phone. I was 24 and terrified, and I made the call I made, and I'm not going to apologize for surviving." His jaw tightened and then released. "I'm not asking you to apologize." "Good. He stopped. "I don't know what I am right now." "That's allowed," I said. "It's a lot." He looked at the tablecloth for a long moment. Then, "Can I see her?" And that was the question I had spent 8 years building a wall around. The one I had told myself would never need answering. And here it was, from a man who looked like he meant it, sitting across from me in the restaurant where I worked. "I don't know yet," I said. He nodded. Slowly. "Okay. That's a real answer, not a no." "I know," he said. "I'll take it." I stood up. My shift was technically over. My feet hurt in the real way again, the way I couldn't stop feeling once the adrenaline started to drop. "How long are you in Vancouver?" I said. 2 weeks. "Maybe more, depending on the deal." "Then we have time to do this properly," I said. "Not tonight. Not like this." "Whatever you need," he said, and something in his tone was so carefully neutral, so deliberately not pressuring, that it almost broke through the wall I'd been holding all evening. Almost. I took my apron off and folded it. Old habit. "There's a coffee shop on Main Street," I said. "Saturday, 10 o'clock. I'll be there." "If you want to talk more." "I'll be there," he said immediately. I nodded once and walked back through the restaurant. The front dining room was mostly empty now, a couple at a corner table, Theo wiping down the bar. The lights had been dimmed to the end of evening setting. Outside, the cold hit me again. I stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the sky. For a moment, the orange-gray Vancouver night sky that never really gets dark because of the clouds. My phone buzzed. My sister again. She got the tooth out. Full drama production. I have it wrapped in a tissue for the ferry. I smiled at my phone, alone on an empty street at 10 past 10 in February. I had not made any decisions tonight. I had not forgiven anyone or resolved anything, or fixed the 9 years that sat between one version of my life and another. I didn't know what Saturday would bring or what happened after Saturday, or what it meant for Maeve to eventually know, someday, the shape of where she came from. But I had said 2 weeks, and I'd meant it. The SkyTrain was warm and almost empty at this hour. I got a seat by the window and watched the city slide past. The lit-up condos, the dark streets below, the bridges over the inlet. Somewhere across the city, my daughter was asleep in the bed I'd picked out for her at a garage sale in East Van, with her freshly lost tooth wrapped in tissue and her dreams full of whatever 7-year-olds dream about. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass of the window. I had held this secret so long, it had become structural, part of how I was built. I didn't know yet what it would feel like to put it down, whether there would be relief or just a different kind of weight. But as the train carried me home through the February dark, I let myself think, for the first time in a very long time, that some doors don't close because they're finished. Sometimes they close because it's not the right time yet. And sometimes a man walks into a restaurant looking directly at you, across a room full of noise, and you realize that time is a stranger thing than you thought. I didn't know what Kieran was now. I didn't know what he deserved, or what I was capable of giving, or what was fair to Maeve, or what was fair to me. I had exactly enough information to get to Saturday. That would have to be enough for tonight. The train pulled into my station. I gathered my bag and stood. Outside, the air smelled like rain. I walked home.